Hey, Christine and Lisa. How's it going, Jill? I won't let anybody else in, so if you got any questions, we can try to answer some.
Hi, it's Lisa.
Hey, Lisa.
Good methodology.
Yeah, the waiting room works wonders. Sorry.
Howdy, everyone.
Hi.
Hi, it's Jill from Tucson.
Jill, how you doing? Thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you for facilitating it this evening.
Absolutely no problem.
Right, so Kirk, this is my first time, so I'm gonna do my best to share.
Welcome everyone to the June meeting for the Inland Empire Chapter Breadfruit Grower Group. We will get started here. It's 9 after. We got a wonderful presentation here tonight from Jill with desert harvesters. Folks a bit on the Sonoran Desert plants out there, but real quick, we got some quick announcements. Lisa?
Hi, thank you, Kirk. I'm actually taking an interest, and please hit me up in the chat under Lisa. And if anyone is interested in growing coffee plants for California, they don't grow in your backyard. But I am taking, I see the 4 or 5 of you. Sorry, the sun's setting down here, that have already showed interest. So if anyone else is interested, I will take down your contact information and try to line up varieties that would be best for your area. Thank you, Kirk.
No problem. So next up, we got Christine, who's gonna do a brief intro here. Christine, I'll put you on mute because we're getting some background on you.
Hi, I unmuted. Okay, this is Christine Lampe. Hi, everybody. Our guest today is from the Desert Harvesters Group, Jill Lorenzini. I think, I'm not sure if I'm saying your name right.
That's right.
And the reason I reached out to the Desert Harvesters, they're in the Arizona, Phoenix and Tucson area. And they focus on using native plants, especially the big trees out in the desert, that provide a harvest that a lot of people haven't been using. And a lot of these plants, although she's, Arizona natives, they can grow here too. I know, we can grow mesquites here. We can grow palo verdes. I've got several growing on my property. I'd like to learn more about the mesquite because I want to plant some here. So that's why I really wanted to learn. This was, selfish information that I wanted. And so I'm going to hand it over to Jill and let her introduce herself and continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. And yes, I've lived in Tucson about 28 years. I didn't grow up here. I grew up in Western New York State, but I find the desert very fascinating. I'm a plant person, so of course the plants here with their amazing strategies and resilience are quite fascinating and inspiring. And of course there's a whole thousands of year history of indigenous cultures using the native foods, in that case out of necessity. Here we have choice in that. So I'm very inspired, and Desert Harvesters' goal is to help rewild the urban and suburban core. in which a lot of native plants were removed for the sake of development and replaced sometimes by non-native species. So Desert Harvesters thinks that, food security and water security have a big connection to native foods. So we are going to talk about bean trees this evening. And Desert Harvesters has a great resource in our cookbook, which was published a few years ago, and also a website that we're working on revising. Parts of it are done, other parts are not. We also have a large store at which you can buy the cookbook and other products like printed bandanas. We're just a small grassroots nonprofit here in Tucson. And this is the region we're in. So the Sonoran Desert includes a couple of countries and various states, including parts of Southeast California. Of course, extreme heat and aridity are characteristics of the Sonoran Desert. And because it ranges so widely across the borderlands, there are various subdivisions of the Sonoran Desert. Tucson happens to be the largest city in Uplands, Arizona, which is just the northern and easterly most part of the entire Sonoran Desert. And so the cookbook focuses on Arizona Uplands subdivision, of which Tucson is part of. And the special thing about Arizona Uplands is that we have 2 rainy seasons. This sets the Arizona Uplands apart from the other subdivisions of the Sonoran Desert, the 6 subdivisions, in that it supports bean trees, which is what we're going to be talking about tonight. So we are grateful to receive rains in the summer and the winter. So right now it's what would be considered dry summer. Not until the end of this month will the conditions for monsoon start to be ideal. And again, right now there's the bean trees, including Palo Verde, ironwood, and mesquite, are in various stages of production, of flowering and making pods and seeds. And they have a lot to teach about resilience. These trees are all very drought tolerant. They're able to be deciduous in a variety of conditions. And so they have a lot of strategies to deal with this climate. And there's also a definite spirit about the Sonoran Desert and the plants here. If you've ever been here, you might know what I'm talking about. And of course, like every place else, we're dealing with climate crisis and changes in, the predictability of seasons and plant production. One of the indicators of climate crisis here has been more fire. So this is a photo overlooking the valley of Tucson from the foothills of the Tucson Mountains during the Bighorn Fire, just a year ago now. So we can continue to look to things like the bean trees to teach us about resilience. And I'm going to focus on the 3 main bean trees that Christine talked about: Palo Verde, ironwood, and mesquite. And I'm going to start with Palo Verde and move to ironwood because they're similar. So, and then I'll finally talk about mesquite at the end. So this is, I'm inspired in lots of different ways, and Desert Harvesters empowers people to become inspired as well by desert foods. It might inspire you to make art and to relate to plants and foods this way. So this is dry erase board art that I did to distinguish between the main bean trees. The two natives that have the highest edibility are Foothills Palo Verde and Blue Palo Verde. They're pictured here. Blue Palo Verde has the darker blossom on the right and usually begins the season of bean tree blooming in the Sonoran Desert in sometimes mid-April into May. And Foothills Palo Verde on the left has a lighter bloom. That's one way to distinguish it. And it follows close behind Blue Palo Verde in the bloom season. And upland Sonoran Desert is the valley floor where Foothills Palo Verde thrives. It just dominates on the scene, and it closely overlaps the range of saguaro cactus, and they're very, very interrelated. Also interspersing the valley floor of uplands Arizona are sky islands, these mountain ranges that appear in of the valley where these kind of desert bean trees thrive. So you're overlooking the bloom of mostly Foothills Palo Verde. And Palo Verde are also unique because they have, if you know the Spanish translation of Palo Verde, it's green stick. So you can't mistake Palo Verde with most any other of the bean trees because they have a very bright green bark on the stem. Beautiful bright green bark, beautiful bright yellow flowers, really adds a lot of color to the desert. And of course, all the bean trees have a very intimate relationship with saguaro cactus, the dominant and iconic species of columnar cactus here that also provides amazing amounts of food. Palo Verde, you know, and saguaro are also make up guilds of plants and animals that interrelate and help each other thrive. Foothills Palo Verde, the Latin name is Parkinsonia microphylla, and it has some of the tiniest, tiniest leaves on any tree I've ever seen. Here's a scale. Those are car keys, and these are the little leaflets of Foothills Palo Verde. Very tiny. The tree is often deciduous, and because of the green bark, photosynthesis happens primarily in the bark and a little bit in the pods, leaves, and blossoms. Another distinguishing feature of Foothills Palo Verde is that it has one white petal and 4 light yellow petals, which gives it the lighter overall yellow color when it's in bloom. Another way to distinguish the two Palo Verdes are the pod shape and characteristics. Foothills Palo Verde pods are what would be described as beaded. You can definitely see the seeds and the pod, which is constricted around them, looking like a string in between a string of beads. Beautiful pods. The difference here is this is blue Palo Verde pods in the green stage, and you can see the seeds inside and how the pod is not really constricted around them. It's wider, it's flatter. And then there's also not to be confused with the two native species of Mexican Palo Verde, which has flowers. Oops, I got that. That's blue Palo Verde with the blue looking bark and the all yellow flower. It has bigger leaves than Foothills Palo Verde, so it provides a lot more shade. And here's a little close-up of the blue Palo Verde pods and leaves in various stages. The seeds inside are a little bit different shape. They're a little more square. This is a mature pod from the previous season that has decomposed a little bit on the ground. We always advise people to harvest off trees and not the ground for all the bean trees. These are mature blue Palo Verde pods. They turn a tan color. And when we look at edibility of Palo Verde trees, this is back to foothills, the flowers of all the Palo Verdes are edible in the fresh and dried stage. They fall to the ground and provide nutrient for the soil, and also a lot of animals and insects use them. This is an ant pile. They've collected the blossoms for the opening of the hole and also have brought some inside to grow fungus on. Spiders use the fallen blossoms to create little tunnel openings. And here's one way to use fresh flowers as a garnish on any kind of food or salad. This is a yogurt. Beautiful color. The eye eats first, as I like to say. So this is a great way to use a seasonal, local, nutritious, colorful food that helps you connect to season and place. When the flowers get pollinated, a bean starts to develop. This is Foothills Palo Verde when it's very young and it has not begun to constrict around the seeds. This is a little further on in development at a perfect stage for gathering. You can see the tiny leaves on the leaf stems in the background. Perfect stage for harvesting. You can easily pick them off the trees, open the pod, it kind of zippers open, and there inside are the sweet tasting pea-like seeds. You can eat them fresh, but to retain their freshness, you would have to blanch them. That is a process by which you put the seed pods whole into boiling water in order to stop the growing, so the seeds stay green. If you left them, they'd just continue to develop and dry and turn brown. In a blanching process, you also stop that blanch with a cold or ice water bath. At that time, you can sit with friends and do the processing of removing the seeds from the seed pod. And we like to talk about this kind of work for slow food. Will work for slow food. It's worth it because this is superfood. A seed is pure protein, other nutrients besides that. But as well, like I consider when I eat these foods, I feel like I'm putting part of this beautiful place that I live and love into my body. And I become part of place, and place becomes part of me. And it's a great way to catch up with friends, sit around, process food, tell stories, sing songs, appreciate life and the abundance of where you live. Often bean trees have so much abundance that there's enough to store. So after a blanching process, you can put Palo Verde seeds into containers and freeze them. And I'm showing you Foothills Palo Verde because here in Tucson, we've come to favor the Foothills Palo Verde for its ease of gathering. There's no thorns on Palo Verde branches, but there are on blue Palo Verde, so it's easier to harvest from Foothills. And you can use these blanched and or fresh seeds in salsas. You can pickle them. You can use them as a garnish on a 3-bean salad, and another version of 3-bean salad with a native cultivated crop of tepary beans. Even if you miss the green stage of Palo Verde, you can probably continue to harvest when it's in the dry stage. The pods turn a reddish brown, and they can again be easily collected because they're ready to drop to the ground just in time for summer rains so that they can be germinated into new trees. At this time, the seeds can be collected. The dry pods can easily be, crushed and the seeds removed. Again, in nature, they fall to the ground. These got trapped in a a prickly pear pad where rain was captured, a little rain harvesting basin in a prickly pear pad. And they would normally germinate there or on the ground, but we can sprout them ourselves in a similar conditions by soaking them in water like you would an alfalfa sprout or any other clover seeds, whatever. Drain them and allow the seeds to sprout. And then the hard seed coat can be removed, and these can be used as is in salads. They can be sprouted a little bit further so the leaf opens, and used in various ways. Moving on to ironwood, the seeds are prolific and can be used in a similar way. This is more dry erase art of observing the seeds in the pods and how beautifully they constrict, way differently than foothills Palo Verde, but the same way defining the seeds. Ironwood is a keystone species in the desert. It's an amazing tree. It's a habitat modifier because of the wonderful, rich soil underneath its canopy and the way the surrounding branches moderate the temperature of the soil. It's a sanctuary for the germination and growth of sensitive species and important species like saguaro cactus. Ironwood can grow to be hundreds, if not thousands of years old. And even though they're called ironwood and they have very, very dense wood that actually sinks in water, they can have fluid kind of growth pattern where they reach up and curve down and come back down to the ground. This is an ancient one. And sometimes in the desert, you find the old stumps of the hardwood of ironwood, which is almost not biodegradable because of the chemicals that are in the heartwood. This is a very, very old one because it has lichen all developed on the heartwood stump. It also has relation perches for raptors like the great horned owl. Close to the same in the little crater. And ironwood have one of the most reliable canopies of all the bean trees. They're almost always evergreen. Some of the only times they shed leaves are right before the bloom and putting on seeds to conserve energy. They're able to host mistletoe without much problem. Like Palo Verde, the pea-like beautiful purple flowers are edible. They can be collected fresh and eaten that way as a garnish. Or once pollinated, the beans of the ironwood begin to develop. You can observe them again, journal, draw. They tend to be sticky and hairy. Right around the same time saguaro are fruiting, bean trees are starting to mature. Like with Palo Verde, they have a green stage, which is like this in appearance. The pods are a tan color. They might have a little tinges of red. And inside, the seeds are green. This is them harvested in that stage and boiled and seasoned into edamame, like you would with soybeans. So you could season with salt and open them up and eat them. It can be used in other things like salads and salsas. Again, as with Foothills Palo Verde, if you miss the green season, don't fret. There's always the season when the seeds are dry. They dry and tend to dehice and fall to the ground, where they're tumbled in the washes where ironwood trees favor growing by and scarified so that they might germinate. Again, they can be picked in this stage, shelled. They can be sprouted. Here they are on the end, soaked and sprouted. They make beautiful sprouts for garnish as is, or they can be stir-fried. My friend Barbara at Bean Tree Farm also roasts them in a solar oven and then mixes them with popcorn and pumpkin seeds to make a Three Sisters snack mix. And then there's mesquite. And unlike Palo Verde and ironwood, the focus of edibility in mesquite is actually the pod itself. In Palo Verde, the pod is not edible. The seeds are. In mesquite, the seeds are edible if they're ground up, but they're super, super hard. Mesquite is a wonderful tree for shading, essential here in the Sonoran Desert. We recommend making rainwater harvesting basins to support the growth of native trees and the harvests. Mesquite foliage is a great food for desert animals, as are the pods. It's wonderful to garden under mesquite and other legume trees because they fix nitrogen in the soil. And mesquite is great as a structural plant for garden vines like this gourd. All the litter as well that falls to the ground helps enhance the soil. Desert soils are often missing organic matter and nitrogen, so the bean trees supply this to other plants in the root zone. Mesquite, like the other bean trees with their gigantic blooms, are great for desert pollinators. Mesquite honey is well known for its wonderful flavor. And once the pollinators have pollinated all the small flowers on the catkin, the mesquite pods, the velvet mesquite pods here, you can see kind of the fuzzy velvet on them begin to develop. Here they are again. And in this green stage, as this, you can start to see the seeds develop inside. And the seeds are contained in a very tough inner endocarp. And as the seeds grow and plump, the wonderful, tasty, sweet pulp of the pods begins to develop. And you can kind of see the progression of that, of a seed pod. Here's a closer up version of how the pod develops. And when the seeds are very dry is when is the best time to harvest, and especially before the monsoon rains begin is the best time. Later this month, pods will begin to be ideal for harvesting. They'll be dry. You can hear seeds rattle inside. The birds may begin to strip some of the sweet pulp from the pods. Oh no. Sorry about that. So, and pods come in a variety of sizes and shapes. This is the screw bean mesquite pod, another native. These are honey mesquite pods and velvet mesquite pod, one of our favorite natives. And another harvest practice is to taste the pods before you harvest them so that you know they have a desirable flavor. Most of the time, the flavor of mesquite might be described as mapley or nutty. It might also have tones of like caramel and apple and maybe chocolate or tamarindo. These might all be desirable, so it's great to taste test. And then always harvest off the trees for the safest harvests. You never want the pods to come in contact with moisture on the ground. And here's the different screw bean mesquite pod in its development. It has a very sweet flavor. And evidence of indigenous cultures thousands of years ago grinding mesquite pods into flour are evidenced by this bedrock mortar filled with rain. So those ancient technologies were like a large mortar and pestle to free up the sweet pulp. Desert Harvesters was awarded a grant a number of years ago to purchase a hammer mill, an industrial hammer mill, so that we could serve the community by grinding pods into flour. The mill removes the hard inner endocarp and often the seed inside. Sometimes the seeds get out and are ground into the flour, adding more protein. But mostly the flour is a benefit because it has calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, a lot of fiber and carbohydrate, and natural low glycemic sugars. It's also gluten-free. So Desert Harvesters over the years has honed best harvest practices. We inspect people's pods when we run millings so that they're guaranteed a safe product that's clean and free of any kind of contaminants. And also it helps our mill for all the pods to be completely dry, and so that the mill doesn't get gummed up with pods that are not fully dry. We also have, made people aware that there are aflatoxin molds that can develop on the outside of pods. Most of the legumes and other legumes like soy are often tested this way. We have test kits if people are interested in testing their flour so that they know that it's free from those contaminants. We became a gateway for people to start tasting desert foods by holding pancake breakfasts over the years. And beyond pancakes, mesquite flour can be used in many ways, from savory recipes to sweet. And something a lot of people don't know is if you miss a milling event, or you would rather use the pods in a different way, the pods can also be simmered whole and strained into a broth for things like a soup. This is a restaurant that we collaborate that made a mesquite broth pod Thai soup. It's great for a beverage base as well. This is a mesquite chai tea with a mesquite syrup on the rim. And this is just another inspiration from the Sonoran Desert for Be Like a Bean Tree. And I also have a couple other things. Let's see. Stop that. Okay, I guess,
You doing okay there, Jill?
yeah, I'm trying to get my other, yeah, okay, now I'm back to where I can see.
Yeah, that window pops up and you can select what you want to share on your screen.
I see. Okay, well, since I'm running late and I'm not going to be able to pull that off, I'm happy to answer questions.
So the one question I see in here is, at what altitude in the desert can they grow? Yuma County, Arizona to Mojave, 4,000 feet, question mark.
Yeah, the low desert, which is mostly what I've been talking about, is, you know, between 2,000 and 3,000 feet. Ironwood would, I'm sorry, 2,000 to 3,500 feet, 2,000 to 3,500 feet. Ironwood would not grow above that point. Certainly, foothills and other Palo Verdes may. Mesquite, I think, would be way more wide ranging in terms of elevation.
Okay, cool. And then I had a question as far as you're talking about the summer monsoons. So in, Southern California, we don't really have much rain in the summertime. So would they still be suitable to grow out here or just need additional watering?
Well, I think that for sure additional watering. I mean, I think Christine said she's been trying to grow Palo Verdes, so I'd be interested in what her experience is. But even here, Kirk, we've been in a long-term drought here in Tucson for quite some time, and I'd say the last 3 years it's become extreme, with more of the climate crisis right up in our faces. So we, like last year, we got well under what would be considered our average rainfall. So even here, we're going to have to start thinking about supplementing, especially in the urban core and the suburbs, supplementing even native trees. And in some cases, that's why they do well in the urban cores, because they get irrigation and or runoff, from, say, street flooding, where there's so much hardscape that some of the only places the water can go, if it's directed, are, to plantings and edible landscape.
There was a comment here from Lisa. She's growing Palo Verde in Riverside, and there's a mesquite in the Whitewater area.
And have you had any harvests yet?
Very little. We've been battling gophers. They like the roots. My mesquite has been completely eaten from the roots. So we're trying to work around that pest.
Right.
The beans, though, that I did get are actually from a locust, more of a locust tree.
I see.
But then they have the weevil damage. So I think I either need to collect earlier or if you have any suggestions.
Right, I don't know. Do you amend them at all with any kind of soil amendments or mulching or?
What would you recommend? I have not. Right now they're in decomposed granite, and I'm just trying to fit it into that type of environment.
Right, I guess, yeah, I mean, I'm coming from the perspective of like a gardener. Whenever I have problems with things, I tend to think they might need more help in terms of nutrient. That's one thing that's worked for me. As far as the bean trees and gardening and stuff like that, I've noticed in the last 3 years, kind of along with the extremes in temperature, more pest problems, like with here, it's like round-tailed squirrels, you know, so eating blossoms, leaves, pods, seeds in way bigger numbers. So I don't really know how to predict what's going to happen or how well things will be there, but
We,
certainly,
ha- we do
yeah.
have a diversionary wildlife drinking fountain. It's just a ground level watering hole that is away from the tree. So it does help. It has helped in the last 2 years from them to stop eating the roots. So
I
they have
see.
a watering source.
Great.
But yeah, I'll try so just general compost or nitrogen enhancers. Well, it would need the nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium for the fruit and the pod set.
Right. I tend to do teas and water them in. I've used bat guano and various other nutrient teas. You know, there's people do a lot of mulching here. The protocol kind of is to do really, really deep rainwater harvesting basins and then mulch them so that there's a whole biological process of breakdown and mycorrhizae and all kinds of interaction. And so that providing nutrient and, you know, prevention from evaporation, that's a huge one here.
This is Christine. And so I think I've got my screen pointed at
Oh,
my
yes.
Palo Verde that
Yes.
came with this property. So I don't know what type it is. It exhibits, it's got the constricted pods, but
Right.
it has the thorns all at every node. So it's not the foothills or the blue.
Right. It could be what are the leaves like?
They're small.
Right. It could be a hybrid. You know, there have been hybrids developed by the Desert
There's a
Museum
Mexican
here.
variety. I read about a Mexican variety, Archuleta,
Yes.
Archuleta.
That one grows here as well. It doesn't have the same kind of edibility, but certainly very drought tolerant and great for pollinators.
So I collected the seeds last year. I put a tarp down and shook the tree.
Great.
But I kind of got stuck in the cleaning process. It took
Right.
forever to separate this from the chaff. So
Yes.
I don't know if there's easier, more efficient methods. So I still have the seeds. I read how you're supposed to sprout them on your website, but I haven't done that.
Yes, that's one of the easiest ways. I have heard from other folks here that are able to harvest very large quantities of foothills, Palo Verde, and ironwood, that you could also grind those in the dry stage into flour. The outer seed coat is quite hard, but once it's ground, it has edibility. We
Oh,
Desert Harvesters at some point has thought of grinding those seeds in our hammer mill, but we haven't, you know, collected them in enough quantity to really make that happen. But certainly, you know, you could do that in a you know, a home grinder, a Vitamix blender. to use
I,
this.
I did eat some of the beans fresh. We moved here last June, so I was just learning about this tree, and it was just at that point they were just starting to get dry. So I only had a few while they were still in the fresh stage.
I see.
You know, they were good.
Great.
So this year I plan to sell out more while they're fresh and green. And then I bought from a local nursery what I assume is the foothills. It has a dark, almost purple bark and thorns all over it. So I haven't seen the pods yet. And then I bought it, they had another one that didn't have the purple bark, was, the green bark. So I assume it's either this same kind as my big tree or maybe the foothills. So
Right.
once I see the flowers in the pods, I'll know more to be able to identify it.
Great.
Is there a place to order trees? A good source?
I don't know that. I know that there's a local desert nursery here called Desert Survivors that have a very, very comprehensive website. And certainly, I don't know if they ship, but it's a great resource. You could look up all the different species and by color, pollinator, edibility. So that would be one
So
of the.
I was reading that the mesquite trees are kind of a water hog, that they, kind of keep other things from growing close to them. Did I understand that correctly?
I wouldn't say that. Mesquite, if anything, they have one of the deepest tap roots, so the native mesquite tend to, get down to water that other trees might not be able to reach. So I wouldn't say that they're a water hog. In fact, they're quite low water use. It doesn't mean that they wouldn't benefit from supplemental water, like from a rainwater harvesting basin. They'd be placed at, the top or the edge of one to be able to benefit from that.
By a water hog, they were greedy for whatever water was there, and thus didn't allow other plants to grow close to them.
Yeah,
So I was just trying to figure out where I should plant them.
Yeah, I tend to think of more as like an anchor to a guild of plants. Like there'd be mesquite with, prickly pear and cholla and creosote fairly close by, and intergrowing saguaros for sure. And that's the wild, so that's a template for urban and suburban growing. But yeah, they're one of the most used trees for shade and for anchoring landscapes, and for sure for those of us who garden in the desert. The template that I've used, I've gardened in the same place for about 20 years, and it's surrounded by different bean trees, a fairly large area. And over the years, of course, by me watering my garden, the natives have grown up to the point where they've kind of shaded the garden out, and it's time to move to a different spot. So the trees and all the native plants have grown right along with the gardens, and benefited from the watering and the amending of the garden. And vice versa, it's a reciprocal relationship. All those bean trees at the root level help fix nitrogen and benefit the plants, and certainly the shading. So I don't know if that could be transposed into your bioregion there.
No, that for where I'm located, which for anyone else who doesn't know, I'm between Paris and Hemet, so I'm in very dry scrubland, high fire hazard zone. And yeah, I appreciate the fact that they are legume trees So they're nitrogen fixing, but also when it was, my tree is just starting to flower. I've seen other trees in the area are already much more advanced in the flowering. So I was interested when you talked about how was it the blue flowers first and then the foothills, or the
Yes, that's often the pattern. So the bright yellow blue Palo Verde blooms come first, followed by foothills and the other
Well, I
hybrid.
also know this tree I have has the all yellow flowers. But yeah, when it was in flower last year, it just really attracted the pollinators. They were just all over it.
Oh, wonderful. Yes. Yeah, so
And I had read, I know there's a desert museum variety that has no thorns, so people like that in landscaping, but I had read that it wasn't as attractive to the pollinators
Right.
because they more recognize the native species.
yes, there's so many interrelationships that you have to consider. But do you all do a lot of water harvesting? Is that popular and something that's encouraged there?
Somewhat. Yeah, I had encountered Brad Lancaster a few years ago when he was giving talks in San Diego County, and yeah, there's some movement here to do the rainwater harvesting. So we're encouraging that. We're trying to learn more.
Yes, I think it's going to be essential here, and everywhere where in arid lands where we might be facing less rainfall and hotter temperatures and just erratic kinds of patterns. So yeah, I think that, from what it sounds like where you are, Christine, you could only benefit from that, and especially these bean trees that thrive in those kind of conditions.
Question just came through, Jill. How do you propagate Palo Verde?
Well, the seeds can be propagated. You can soak them, as was shown, where they would begin to sprout. Foothills Palo Verde tend to be easily sprouted like that. It appears that there's not really a big need for scarification for Foothills Palo Verde. Blue Palo Verde is a little bit different. A friend found that they sprouted easier using a boiling water method on the seed to kind of scarify the outer coat and ready it for germination. So also a medium like a sandy soil, like it would normally germinate in, a desert soil, a little bit of clay, a little bit of sand that stayed moist. They could be sprouted in that. Sometimes we've demonstrated with other seeds, you can lightly clip the outside seed coat. Ironwood needs that sort of a imposed scarification. They often get tumbled in the rains down very gravelly washes where the seed coats are scarified and then they sprout. So with Palo Verde, it would be about, can you get the seeds? So depending on where you get the seeds, I think you could easily sprout them from seed.
This is Christine again. I had looked up on the CalFlora, which is from the California Native Plant Society. They have, listings of plants and their ranges, and it gave both the foothills and the blue, kind of their western edge of their range was in Riverside County. Wow. I think one came past Palm Springs. I think that was the foothills, and the blue one, I think, where we have our demonstration orchard at the Harupa Mountains Discovery Center, it was inside the range of one of the two trees.
Wow, that's impressive. Yes, I've seen them in Joshua Tree thriving there, which is probably way less rain than here.
I imagine so.
There's another question. What
We're
causes
starting.
the pinholes in the seed pods?
Okay, that's a great question, great observation. There's a small beetle called a Baruchid beetle, B-R-U-C-H-I-D. What they do is lay their eggs into the pod, into the seed, while the seed pod is green. And you can't really see that evidence of that, but when the seed matures, the life cycle of the Baruchid beetle is such that the larva has emerged and grown and exits the pod as a mature beetle. So they cut that little circular hole out of the pod as an escape route. So when you see those holes in the pod, that means that the beetle has completed its life cycle and left the pod. Now, sometimes when you have harvested either Palo Verde pods or mesquite pods, I haven't really ever seen the Baruchid beetle holes in the ironwood seeds as much. You might harvest them at a time when the emergence has not happened. So one of the things that we recommend if people harvest mesquite pods and are going to store them, that they leave the container with some sort of a vent hole, perhaps a screened hole that was cut in the top, or the lid is slightly cracked, so that when the beetles do emerge, which they inevitably will from the right pods, they have a way to get out of the container. Baruchid beetles, they aren't harmful. I'm sure they've been eaten many a time either in the pod in various stages of development, or sometimes the Baruchid beetles maybe were in some of the pods that got into the mill. So it just adds a little extra protein. But they're harmless.
Another question just came up. Can you propagate blue Palo Verde from cuttings?
I don't know that, but I'm gonna guess no. And I'm not an expert on that. Yep, I don't know the expert answer to that.
Hey, my name's Buddy.
I wish I did.
I have a question. I have 3 mesquite trees that are about 40 feet tall, and the trunk is almost 3 feet in diameter. And
Wow.
the 2 outside ones have never put out pods, only the middle one.
Huh.
It's been that way for 15 years.
Wow.
I'm wondering if there's a male and female.
Not that I'm aware of. And yeah, I can't imagine what's going on there. Did you plant the trees? Do you
They
know?
were here when they bought the property. They're spread out. They're like, if you imagine an acre and one on one side, one in the middle, and one on the other side, that's how they're set up. So,
Wow.
and there are some. It's like they're like 30 feet in diameter.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's huge. Yeah, that's
The
gigantic.
one that has the pods found the dry well in the septic tank.
I see. Yes, with those deep tap roots. Yeah.
Well, I'm wondering, because I don't want to kill it, but I don't want it to break up the seepage pit rings either. So I was thinking about pouring salt down there.
Ah.
That won't hurt the tree, will it? Or will they just get rid of the roots out of there?
Yeah, that's another that's another tough question that I don't really know the answer to.
Yeah, because I don't want to use any copper stuff, that'd kill the tree.
Right. But yeah, I mean, the pattern of mesquite trees is to grow in large bosques. There's different parts of Tucson that where the water table is higher and you come across, just large forests or what are called bosques of mesquite. So perhaps at a different time, there were more trees there.
Uh,
That were more productive. I don't know what might be impeding the production on the other two trees. I do
yeah.
know that there's, here in Tucson, of course, we favor, using native trees and replanting in places where they've been removed, but as well, other non-native mesquite trees have been introduced to the area for not edibility reasons, but because they maybe grow faster in a landscape situation. They have more character maybe, or they, provide more shade in a faster amount of time, but they really aren't from this place. So they don't have the same sort of root systems, and they often get blown over in the rain, and they often hybridize with the native species. So what I have seen, and before I knew better, I planted a non-native mesquite where I lived, and it seemed to interrupt the growth of some of the natives and sort of hybridize with them to the point where they didn't produce the same. And that's all that I can think of was maybe there was a hybridization process.
Yeah, they've been here a long time. I even found some grinding bowls
Oh my gosh, yep.
from Indians or something, because there's 5 acres here. And I find grinding stones, and then the little rock that they grind, it's rounded on the end.
Yes.
Rocks with
Mortar and a mono or a pestle like.
Yeah,
That's great.
I just set them on the wall.
Wow. Well, so that, yeah, people have been there before using the native plants for food.
They're okay to eat if they've been getting water out of the wet well.
Well, probably unless they fall on the ground and there's some sort of contamination, I think the tree would be able to.
All the chipmunks, rabbits, they all hang out there.
Yeah, it's good eating. Yes. Yeah, and animals tend to really favor mesquite pods for the sweet flavor. So we hear all sorts of stories of all the different kinds of animals that eat mesquite pods. And we had a woman who went in the millings, the mill removes the hard endocarps covering the seeds and debris. And the latest use of that was for people doing vermiculture, that the worms really, really enjoyed the mesquite chaff.
Well, thank you.
Sure, thank you for sharing. It sounds like you have a very, very cool property.
Yeah.
There's another question. Sorry, go ahead, buddy.
No, I just said it was a lot of work. Keeping it up.
Hi, this is Christine again. I was just checking, I gave the name wrong. It was Calscape, not Calflora. Calscape.org.
Okay.
I put the website in the chat, and I put in mesquite, and it says there's 6 mesquite native to California, and the honey mesquite and screwbean mesquite, and then just a southern mesquite that Prosopis glandulosus variat Torriana. Anyway, you can see that they're native to Riverside, Moreno Valley, our area. So you can click on that, and they give you a regional map for where these are native, so you can make sure which trees you have. I checked on ironwood, and there's some out in the real eastern part of California, the desert, but I didn't see any. And there's one for the Channel Islands, but I didn't see an ironwood that covers most of our area. but between the mesquite and the Palo Verde, there's a lot that are native.
Yes, yeah, that's exciting. And you know, mesquite is probably the most popular of the bean trees. And, you know, Gary Nabhan wrote a recent book called, you know, Mesquite, A Love Affair. And also the Richard Felger, who recently passed away, really championed mesquite and felt that it was a food plant that could save the world. So it has huge potential and is a, you know, I mean, what other foods are there that are just sweet coming right off the tree? It's a wonderful flavor, and in a climate crisis where food and water security are high priority, it's mesquite and the other bean trees are really important.
There's a question here about to protect bean tree roots from gophers. Would you recommend a large gopher basket, or would that harm the roots?
Oh gosh, yeah, I'm not going to be a good answer on that. I don't know. I've not had direct experience with that. I'm
No
sorry.
problem. That's okay. Yeah, we don't have any more questions at the moment, Jill, but if you want, feel free to plug Desert Harvesters, and I think you said something about products and stuff, so feel free to, you got plenty of time left, so.
Okay, yeah, and I see, I was going to try to bring up the website, but I don't think it's on my shareable. Let's see if I can.
This is Christine again to address the question about the gopher basket. I've planted 6 Palo Verde, like 15-gallon size, and I did use the gopher baskets for those. So, I mean, they're 6 foot tall and still growing. So I hope they're doing okay.
Right?
Experiment in progress.
Right.
Yes.
So I believe that I've shared the Desert Harvesters homepage. Can you see it?
Yep.
Yes.
We can see it.
Okay. So yes, this is a website that's been under construction. It's still not completely finished, but for sure, if you want to support us, we have a store with a variety of written and other resources. You know, we'd of course recommend the cookbook. We have bandanas that recently came out, posters, and we take donations. If anyone is interested in mesquite harvest, which is, at least in our area, soon coming up, we just recently added in the resources section best harvest practices, low risk harvest conditions, avoiding aflatoxins, for, you know, high quality harvests and food safety. So we have divided the website into place, plants, and people. And if you want to find out about Desert Harvesters' long history and what we do, what our focus is, you can access the website. Also, things that haven't moved forward, we have some free, you know, downloadable materials from materials that were produced from another grant called Desert Can Feed You. So there are information pages on all the bean trees that we just talked about, basic information, everything from how to plant and harvest and use. There are also videos in that series. I think there's at least 2 up on the website now. And then there's printable little trifold takeaway materials, a real brief summary of what bean trees and other foods are beneficial. And I have been in the process of working on other graphics. As I said, my background is education. I'm also a very visual person and hands-on, and so been trying to create resources. See if I can get to another one of those. So on the screen now, this will eventually be on the website. This is another graphic called Am I Blue of the different ways that we discussed identifying the native species of Palo Verde. This is another, let's see. Oh boy, technical difficulties.
That's okay, Jill, while you're working on that. Yeah, and then, so we're getting close to the end here. So for all of our guests, we would love to hear, how did you hear about tonight's meeting? Lisa posed that question into the chat box. And that just helps us identify what channels are working well for us, and helps us with, advertising and marketing of the group. So if you would mind, just put into the chat box, how did you hear about us? We'd love to hear your feedback. So.
Well, that's great. Thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Absolutely, Jill. Thank you so much. That was very informative. Always great to learn about, new trees and their capabilities. And yeah, wonderful. So yeah, the meeting is recorded. It will be posted up onto our YouTube channel. So for those that showed up late that want to catch, if you missed something, we will post up the link. It is on our Inland Empire California Rare Fruit Grower channel. So feel free to find it there, and we'll share it with you, Jill, so you can share that with your Desert Harvesters group if you like. So.
Great. Thanks so much, Kirk. Great facilitator.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks. No worries. And best of luck, Jill. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And yeah, and unless anyone's got any more comments or questions or anything, feel free to have a wonderful night, and we'll see you guys the first Thursday of July. So have a great night, and thanks so much for joining us.
Good night.
See you, Dr. Lee. Thanks so much for those quinces. I was able to pick them up. So.
Oh, thank you. Thank you
No.
for taking them.
And Dorothy, before you leave, this is Lisa. Can you email me your or send me your email address so that I can get in contact with you on the coffee plants?
Who's that question for, Lisa?
Dorothy wrote it.
Dorothy. It looks like she's gone already. Did you get a copy, brother? Oh. We'll see if we can track her down somehow.
All right, no worries.
All right.
Thank you, everybody. Good to see and hear y'all.
Yeah, Lisa, you can put us down too. I'd be interested to try grow a coffee plant.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. Yep. And then what are we gonna do for the next plant sale? What any next steps for the next couple weeks or anything? Make sure we don't miss
I'm
the
getting,
runway.
what is that?
Make sure we don't miss the runway and the lead up to it this time.
Yes. Moxie, were you saying something? Or is Moxie actually me? I didn't know I
Yeah,
had the title tonight.
You are Moxie. Yeah. Somehow you got changed up.
I knew who that was. Alter identity. I have no idea who changed that. Okay.
Nice job.
And Amanda, how did you hear about us?